In last weekend's video, we installed the standard ball bearing blade guides onto the Shopsmith bandsaw. And what makes this different is it's designed specifically for using with narrow blades and for almost scroll sawing with your bandsaw. Now, Carter makes dozens and dozens of versions of this to fit pretty much any bandsaw. So even if you don't have a Shopsmith bandsaw, you might learn something about this device, and there's certain to be one specifically for your bandsaw. Now, first order of business, I'm going to take this guard off of this bandsaw. If you're installing this on a Shopsmith bandsaw, you won't need to remove the guard. I'm going to do it just to make it a little easier for you to see. And for this, we're going to need I think it's a 7/16 wrench, could be a socket set or an open end wrench. For this entire process, we're just going to need this one wrench, 5/32 Shopsmith toolbox, and a flat bladed screwdriver. That's it. So let's take this part off. It's held in place with a bolt and a nut. And there we go. We're going to move this entire blade guide system, leaving the thrust bearing in place. Now, with this, we will not be using the standard thrust bearing, but it's not going to be in the way either. And just as before, we come in from the back side here and access a slotted screw, and we're going to unscrew that to remove the knob. You won't need to be doing it as awkwardly as I am. Let me explain what just happened. This knob is on that screw, and that knob was very close to the back of the head of the screw. And as I was backing the screw out, it came to the end of the travel of this device. So I had to slide that or screw that knob forward a little bit, and that'll give me the amount of travel that I need to remove this. There we go. Here you can see what was happening, where that screw was way at the bottom, which is pulling on this little finger here that was drawing this entire mechanism inward, and it wouldn't let me back it out far enough. So that's something you might have to do too. Now we're going to try to pull this out, and we may be able to do it. We may not. May have to resort to using, a rawhide mallet. You can see it's got some gunk on it. It's a little oxidized. I'll clean that up and put some wax or some lubricant on there to keep that from getting gummy. In fact, look at the buildup of pitch and tar here. There we go. That's looking cleaner. All right, we'll set that aside. And while we are here, we're going to go ahead and clean this up. Now there is a spring in here. We don't want to lose this spring. The little leaf spring puts tension against this. But let's clean this out. I'm just going to spray this with some T9. The solvents in the T9 will be enough to loosen up the gunk. And then what will be left behind is a wax. So it'll actually do both jobs for me here. So you can see the stabilizer has the same basic profile as the original part, and it's going to slide right in its place. And then we will reassemble this with that screw. Now, maybe you see the same thing I do, and that is that groove in that top roller ultimately will need to be centered where the blade is. And that's what that set screw there is for. We're going to be able to loosen this and slide that over. But for now, we need to reinstall this little fella. So you can see right now that this screw and that knob are nowhere near the proper alignment. So I'm going to back that screw out. It's threaded into that knob. And I'm going to back it out until the shoulder on the knob matches the shoulder on the stabilizer. Here we go, and at that, I can now put the tip of the screw in place and tighten this up. There's a little drop of Loctite on that thread, and that keeps this in place so we don't actually bottom it out. All right, with that locked in place, we can turn this knob forward, and you can see that moves the stabilizer forward, and we'll move the stabilizer back. Now, there is one more step to this process. We need to eliminate the guide blocks in the bottom from contacting the blade. So we're going to do that. So now on the bottom, we need to get these guide blocks out of the way. We don't use them at all when using the blade stabilizer. So we'll loosen the set screws that hold the block in place, and we'll just slide the block over. It doesn't need to be removed. We'll do the same thing on the right-hand side. Drop it down out of the way. And while we're at it, let's just go ahead and back this block as far back as it can go. I'm turning a knob that's similar to the one on top. All right, now that's completely out of the way. Let's get a blade on. So for the sake of comparison, there's a 1/4-inch blade, and what I'm going to put on here right now is an 1/8-inch blade. If you can see that, it's ridiculously narrow. And it's a blade that's difficult to use without using soft blocks. And really, this is where this device should shine. I failed to say what I hope is a real Captain Obvious statement, and that is I'm doing all of this with the machine unplugged and obviously off. I need to move this guide roller to the right, so I'm going to do that by loosening this set screw, and we'll slide this over until the blade falls in, and in that position where the blade is just naturally lined up, that should run in the groove. Right now we are running against the backup roller, and that is not correct. For this particular setup, we want to bring this forward 1/8 of an inch. How will we know 1/8 of an inch? Well, we should see about 1/8 of an inch gap here between the blade and the top roller. Now, normally, there is a gap between the blade and the top roller on the Shopsmith bandsaw, and on the bottom, we're making contact. So I'm curious how this is going to work, whether it's going to make contact at the bottom or not, and will that even matter? I think we're going to find out. Give this a spin, freehand. Oh, that reveals that I've got a couple spots with some bends. This blade is really super delicate. That doesn't surprise me all that much. Let's get it all the way up to the proper tension. Let's see if that helps matters. Maybe. All right, let's try this out. My grandsons have been practicing their hammering skills, and so we've got some tacks driven here. We'll see if we can avoid those. We're plugged back in, and here we go. Let's cut straight across, and looks like nice, relatively straight cuts. Clean cut for a blade I thought was pretty dull. But, you know, the real test is the Alex Snodgrass reindeer. So let's give this a try. And there we go. So I'm pretty sure that what we were looking at there is a blade that had too many teeth per inch, and let's stop that upper wheel from spinning. Too many teeth per inch, and therefore it was really overburdened. So let's swap that out. All right, so what happened is I'm backing out, pulled the blade right off the wheel. So, try that again. Alex does himself one huge favor by having that design memorized. And so it doesn't matter if he misses his line because none of us would ever know. I'm not saying he's cheating. I'm just saying he's got an advantage. Oh, why is my blade guide up so high? Why didn't you say something about that? That's way too much work. Tip my hat to Alex Snodgrass, who makes these things in his sleep. Okay, I'm going to summarize my thoughts here in just a second, but first let me remind you that we will record, as always, a follow-up to this video midweek where I will address your questions, comments, and cheap shots from this video. So if you have any insights, if you want to share your experience with these Carter stabilizers, please do. Now, what I will say is on a non-Shopsmith bandsaw, one where you have a crowned wheel that tilts and adjusts, and where you have thrust bearings that adjust in and out, things like that, this could be handy for sure. I have a Delta bandsaw in my shop, 14-inch Delta that could never have done the things that I just did with this one. That said, my Shopsmith bandsaw is different. It does have tapered wheels instead of crowned wheels. It does have an upper tilt that's automatically built into it. So there's always tension against the thrust bearing at the bottom. So I don't have the same issues with this bandsaw that I have with other bandsaws. I wasn't able to do anything with this blade stabilizer on this bandsaw that I couldn't do with Cool Blocks. All right, leave your questions, comments, cheap shots, and we'll get to those in our midweek episode of Stumped Q&A. Make it a great week.